Waiting for Grand Theft Auto 6 is not easy in itself. Just imagine that if it hadn't been for the postponement, there would have been literally 3 months left before the game was released. And in the fall, we would have been essentially playing. As it is, we will wait until May next year. But in fact, I would like to discuss a new piece of information that can be said to have come from Rockstar, not directly, of course, but nevertheless, the information is more or less official, and no one really knew this information except the developers, which is why when I found out about these details, I began to wait even more for the release of GTA. In general, there are details about the 3 variants of the first scenario for the game. These scenarios were written back in 2014, when GTA 6 was only at the planning stage. And as we remember, it was in 2014 that the new version of GTA 5 was released on PS4 and Xbox One, and there, in principle, the game was released for the second time. That is, the developers were actively engaged in the 5th part, developing their online mode, and a year later, the game appeared on PC, and so Dan Hauser had a hand in all 3 options. He was the one who took part in writing such stories, but his brother Sam Hauser rejected almost all offers, and therein lie the interesting situations, because it wasn't that easy back at Rockstar, and of course, it all intersects between the brothers. And in this video, I will not only tell you all 3 versions of the plot, but also tell you how the new information intersects with the departure of Dan Hauser from Rockstar Games. Well, Leslie Benzis can also pop up somewhere in the background because he also left the studio walls, though a little earlier than Dan Hauser. Nevertheless, the story is very interesting. So, information appeared on the web that from 2014 to 2019, Dan Hauser wrote 3 full-fledged scripts for the new part of GTA. These were a variety of scenarios, which most often featured 3 game characters. It is clear that Dan Hauser tried to preserve the concept of GTA 5, which everyone liked, but he was not allowed to do so. And it's even a shame because, well, I'll tell you about the first scenario a little later, which, in my opinion, seems to be probably the most ideal in general for the GTA atmosphere. Now, we already know that only 2 characters, Lucia and Jason, will appear in the new part, and the story itself will be much simpler than those that were originally written. That is, most likely, we will get quite such a complicated story in the new part, but, of course, it will be much simpler and much clearer so that younger people also understand and discuss it somehow. Well, so that the older guys don't stay away either. It's probably worth waiting for the plot at about the GTA 5 level. That is such an epic story, but nothing more. In general, these first sketches for the new part of GTA were quite good. I would probably like to play GTA with such characters and twisted plots, but maybe someday Rockstar will take on something like this. Of course, I would like to believe this because I don't think that GTA 7 or GTA 8 will not be released after the new part of GTA. Of course, they will be released, but not soon, and our children or our children's children will already play new parts given how much GTA is being developed. The first script was written between 2014 and 2016. This is the very first version of the sketch that came to the screenwriter's mind. The game was supposed to feature 3 playable characters at once. The first one is a retired policeman. He has already served his time and is just enjoying life. However, there is very little information about the character, and there was only mention of his age. That is, it's like an elderly cop, but at the same time, it's like if he's elderly, then he's probably already retired, because they retire much earlier. In general, the policeman is about the same age as Michael from the 5th part. The second character is his son, who actively uses illegal substances and gets into different unpleasant situations every time, from which, of course, his father needs to somehow pull him out. At the same time, his son also works for an influential drug lord from Colombia. Well, the third character is the drug lord himself, such a major villain. True, it's rather strange that the 3 of them somehow intersected with each other because it doesn't fit together at all, but apparently, the plot here could be very, well twisted. And so the plot was supposed to show directly how a former policeman, through old connections, infiltrates a criminal organization and tries to save his son. It was all supposed to be shown in the best traditions of GTA, of course, with shootouts and with various interesting characters and everything else. The story itself was much darker than the plot of GTA 5 and really showed different plot points. Even moments like this that never happened at all in GTA. Well, This version of the script was cancelled precisely because of the gloomy atmosphere. But at the same time, there were no reasons to rewrite the entire script. By the way, it's possible that some characters from this scenario will appear in the new GTA because we've already been shown a lot of criminal characters and even cops. There's even a theory that Jason is an undercover cop. So perhaps this is, well, let's say, the same slightly altered image of the same policeman father who tried to save his son. The second version of the script was simplified in absolutely everything. Dan Hauser understood that if the first draft was not accepted, then it was necessary to build on some other points. He decided that the plot would revolve around two characters already. The first was a policewoman from the city network, who also infiltrates a criminal organization in order to uncover an entire criminal network and at the same time get her promotion. That is, a careerist who works for the benefit of the people and of course does not forget about herself either. And the second character is a crazy guy who looks like Trevor. He was a courier who delivered prohibited goods to customers. That is, he's not exactly a criminal directly, yes, that is, he's not some kind of super boss, he's just like a courier, but nevertheless, he also appears in the plot. Well, apparently that's how a policewoman comes out to him, and together, they begin to develop a common plot. The most interesting thing is that the main character was still a girl. It was she who moved absolutely the entire story of the game, but the fact that the guy looked like Trevor just doesn't leave me. Personally, I would be happy to see a similar character in GTA, and I think that Trevor is just a godsend. He's not just a psycho, he's a well thought out hero, and there's a story much deeper than it seems from the GTA 5 plot. In general, there are very few such characters in GTA after the release of GTA 5 in general, and we hope that in the future, Rockstar will also add similar characters. I should also add that the information did not say that they were allies. I've already figured it out a little bit myself, but considering that the script is general and there are two characters in it, then one way or another, they would be part of the same plot. But what GTA would be like in this format, we can only guess. By the way, this scenario was also cancelled, but in 2018, and this is exactly the period when Dan Hauser begins to think about leaving the company, but more on that later. Well, the third draft of the script was already the simplest. Dan Hauser understood that his scripts were simply being cancelled and not accepted, and why bother at all? And in 2019, he apparently decided to throw in another option for fun. There was only one character in this version of the story. Initially, Dan Hauser left a policewoman's girlfriend from the last sketch, but then she was changed to an African-American man who was in the military in the past, but for some reason ends up in prison. And the plot just started with the release from prison. There is absolutely no more information about this version, but this plot outline has also been cancelled. By the way, please note that in this scenario, a guy gets out of prison and according to the plot of the new GTA, Lucia comes out of there. And Jason, by the way, is also a former military man in our story. That is, there are some old elements from previous sketches left here. But let's just say that the third version of the script is the most uninteresting. But the first one could probably stay in GTA. And of all the three sketches, it's probably a good thing that the third one was cancelled too, but it's a shame that the first one wasn't accepted either. We see all these sketches only superficially. It is clear that when these scripts were shown to the management, there were characters with their own stories and plot events and scenario twists were also mentioned there. But even so, some of the options sound very interesting. But the problem lies precisely in the manual. All these sketches were cancelled personally by Sam Hauser, that is, the brother of the one who wrote these scripts. As we know, Dan Hauser is leaving Rockstar Games in 2020. The reasons have not been publicly clarified so far, but all three plots are being merged, after which everything becomes more or less in place. It turns out that Dan wrote stories, invented everything, thought everything out well, was ready to change or rewrite something, and as a result, his sketches were simply cancelled over and over again. That is, they did not correct or rewrite, but simply cancelled. It's clear that when Dan wrote the first script, he was totally invested. Even I think that a story with a father, son, and a drug lord would be very interesting. The second draft of the script was already being written with less enthusiasm, but Dan Hauser also tried to think through quite important things. Well, the third draft was already written just for fun, so that, just like that, I'm giving you the script. Just leave me alone. Most likely, he already understood well that this sketch would not be accepted either, and he just understood what was going on. Well, literally a couple of years later, he just leaves the company. It is for this reason that a good screenwriter leaves the company and creates his own personal studio. It's even strange that one brother stayed in the company while the other left. Apparently, they didn't share something or didn't see eye to eye. This happens a lot in principle, but it doesn't happen often in the gaming industry when it happens between brothers. Moreover, after Dan's departure, the GTA script was rewritten several times. But given the timing of the writing of the previous sketches, it probably wasn't completely rewritten, but just slightly adjusted. But it is known that this has happened about 2 or even 3 times. These scenarios may have been discussed, but we just didn't understand the whole situation. It's safe to say that some pretty strange things were going on at Rockstar. Dan Hauser can even be understood as a screenwriter, because when you're fully invested in your work and it's not appreciated, then of course, you can just look for another job in another company. But in 2016, Leslie Benzis also left the studio, and that departure was very loud, because Benzis even sued the company for non-payment of interest. Well, there were such long proceedings, and in the end, they sort of went their separate ways. And the funny thing is that both of these people took an important part in creating the story of GTA and Red Dead Redemption, and both founded their new studios. Let's just say that letting such people go from such a very large company was, of course, a big mistake, and probably in the sense that perhaps their departure will affect the plot of the new part of GTA. We can't know that yet, because we only see trailers and it's hard to say anything there. But anyway, let's just say it can affect at least some percentage. Anyway, these are just sketches that could be used in some way in the future, but since they have already become public, that is, they ended up on the internet, they are unlikely to ever appear anywhere. We can't say yet what GTA would have turned out to be if it had these 3 plot options. We still don't really know what exactly the story of Jason and Lucia will show us, but for some reason I'm sure that in the new version of the game something will appear from the old sketches anyway. Because Dan Hauser is a good screenwriter and he probably wrote something very unusual, and if it's something unusual then it's used somehow anyway. Partially, not completely, but in any case, something of all this will appear. We are waiting for the release of GTA further, and we hope that the current scenario, which was rewritten and chosen in the end, will also turn out to be good. Not just to be good, but to have a story like this, so that after going through the plot, we would just be shocked and discuss the ending for many months. Tell us which version of the script you found the most interesting. Or you can write your scripts in the comments that you would like to see in GTA. That is, this is your version of the plot of the new part of Grand Theft Auto. Thanks for watching, and bye to everyone.